Please keep in mind that the folders I feature in this series are not intended to be used in PvP matches. Not battling online is completely different from playing through the story and post-game content of each Battle.net game, and while I do have some knowledge of PvP in Battle.net 6, I don't have enough knowledge in the other games to recommend any PvP folders. Yeah, so we're going to be breaking that disclaimer I usually do. Welcome to a special episode of Folder Decoder. For episode 5, I decided that we're going to do things very differently. For starters, there's no script. I am doing this unedited, so if I mess up, oh well, it'll be on YouTube. But more importantly, last weekend, on July 2nd, joined a tournament hosted by DemiDRMC and the N1GP, the Proto Cup. And although I didn't do amazing in the cup, I did better than I expected, seeing as I've never actually played PvP before. I have watched PvP games for Battle.net 6 for a few years now, so I do know a bit about PvP, but never participated myself. Well, that changed when I played last Sunday, and unfortunately I don't have footage of those matches. I tried recording them and it didn't work out. However, I decided today we're going to do a Folder Decoder episode talking about the folder that I used in the Proto Cup. So we're breaking the usual primary, secondary, and backup kind of layout that I do, and we're going to just go for it one chip at a time, starting with the premise of my folder. Now, I decided to make a R code folder, and what I initially wanted to do was, if we scroll down through the many battle chips I have, we look at R code, we notice that Meteors is a chip here. Now, when I first made my folder, I actually had a copy of Meteors in my competitive folder here. I thought that it would be really interesting to use the chip. It's very underutilized. Not necessarily the strongest chip, but I figured if I played against enemies that are using Falzer version, I can maybe end up hitting opponents for double damage if they're in Tomahawk Cross. But at the end of the day, I decided to take Meteors out. It's a time freezing chip, which means it can be countered by things like anti-damage or invis, and I didn't want to risk that, so I decided not to go with the Meteors chip. However, I did decide to stick with R code, and I'm going to explain why. For starters, R code has a very important chip in uninstall. The uninstall comes in the, I believe, GL and R codes, meaning that almost every competitive folder will have one of those chips. It's either going to be uninstall R, L, or G, alongside chips of that code or star-coded chips that you can use to uninstall your opponent's Navi customizer. Very important in competitive matches, which I will go over my Navi customizer to explain why. What I really was focused on when making this folder was making sure that I had attacks of as many different elements as possible. I wanted to be sure that I could decross my opponents no matter what crosses they were using. So the 2 copies of Heat Dragon are here to try and stop Tomahawk Cross. I have 2 copies of Bubblestar R, Bubblestar 3, which are intended to either break, charge, or heat cross, or to trap my opponents in bubbles to set up damage for Thunder, which is here to combo with the Bubblestar, as well as to potentially break Oct crosses. Judgeman is here in the star code because it is one of the best chips in the game, breaks invis, paralyzes, and can give you back your panels if your opponent has stolen your area with area grab, so great chip overall. Risky Honey I decided to include for 2 reasons. Number 1, it's a way of breaking Elect Cross. Number 2, it's Risky Honey. It's fun, I love this chip, it's just a great chip, and puts fear in people's hearts. Tornado Airspin I actually decided to throw in as a fun, cheeky little thing. I did end up hitting it on an opponent in the tournament. I only managed to hit it once during the entire tournament, but I did hit it on an opponent that had a barrier up. So the first hit blew away the barrier, and then the second hit actually hit them for double damage because they were in a race cross at the time. But Tornado Airspin is in here tagged together to make sure that they are always together, and it's just as a fun little combo. I was trying to make my folder not like super competitive, but more trying to be a little bit cheeky and fun and pulling off these interesting combos that could get me some attention. Machine Gun is here because Machine Gun is one of the best chips in this game. It is a great chip to be using uninstall on. It's a great chip to use White Capsule on, and it's excellent for breaking Dust Cross, which a lot of Falter players, myself included, start matches in Dust Cross to try and use the Dust Shoot ability to recycle through their folders. So I decided Machine Gun just to try and get rid of Dust Crosses. Raceman is here for similar reasons to Judgeman, one of the best Navi chips in the game. Can actually break Dust Cross, but more importantly just breaks Invis, paralyzes, can use it as a time freeze counter. It's just a great chip overall. Meteor Knuckle is two things. Number one, it is my Giga chip, so I am trying to rely on it to deal big damage. Number two, as a breaker element chip, it breaks Slash Cross, which is very common for people to use. People will run Slash Cross to counter Tengu Cross when people... Basically, if a Greyguard player puts up Life Aura and a Falzar player tries to counter with Tengu Cross, the Greyguard player will counter with Slash Cross, which can deal double damage to and break the Tengu Cross. Meteor Knuckle's here to punish Slash Cross, please. And I did actually end up doing, I think it was 800, maybe even 1,000 damage to one opponent in one match, because they were in the corner with Slash Cross active when I used Meteor Knuckle. Recover 300 is here because recovery is nice to have. This is, I believe, the chip that actually replaced Meteors in Folder. I then have 2 copies of Area Grab, very important in PvP matches to be able to manage area. Grab Revenge for similar reasons, just making sure that if my area is stolen, I'm able to get it back. Full Cust for Falzer, this is very important because of Dust Cross and the Dust Shoot ability. I made sure to set this as my regular chip so that on the first turn, I'm just using Full Cust immediately, just so I could get my Dust Cross active. And the reason Dust Cross is so important is because I am searching for bug fix. My Navi Customizer, of course, has a lot of bugs in it, and I do want to repair them as soon as possible. So I want to try and kind of dig through my folder and get bug fix as soon as I can. I have 2 copies of Invis, which is very different from my casual folders where I throw in 4 copies. Also because there are other defensive chips in this folder instead of just Invis. Also, Invis is liable to being hit by Rush in PvP matches, and there's a lot of attacks that pierce through it, like the Judgeman and the Erase Band chips I talked about. Life Aura is here because it is one of the best defensive chips in the game, forcing your opponents to either use a attack that deals 200 damage, or alternatively, forcing your opponent to use a wind chip like a Wind Rack to blow it away. 2 copies of Anti-Damage, because Anti-Damage is just a great chip overall. It is one of the most common chips in PvP, especially because you can use Anti-Damage to block a lot of attacks. A lot of Navi chips, a lot of Giga chips, Mega chips that freeze time, you use Anti-Damage as a counter to them, and suddenly you're just not taking damage from them. Anti-Navi was there as a cheeky option. People generally expect the Wrap chips to be anti-damage, so when you set up anti-Navi, it can be very cheeky if your opponent doesn't anticipate it, or if your opponent doesn't care about the anti-damage because they have a chip like Erase Man, you can kind of counter that, use it against them. I have a copy of White Capsule to add paralysis to chips, especially to the Machine Gun. The copy of Install, which of course I already did talk about. And lastly, Element Man, another one of the best Navi chips in the game, being able to decross a lot of the crosses in the game. Half of the crosses are weak to either Fire, Aqua, Elect, or Wood, so you can use that to decross them. It is possible, if your opponent is in the column right in front of you, to freeze them with Element Man so that your first hit of Meteor Knuckle deals double damage since they are frozen. But also, it's just great to do things like getting rid of Sanctuary panels. I didn't run Sanctuary in this folder, but a lot of people do run it in PvP. Element Man, if you go into the wood element, changes the entire field into a grass stage, basically, so it gets rid of holy panels. A really good chip, overall. That was my folder. Just trying to hit as many different bases as possible. I have the fire here, aqua, elect, wood, we have wind, wind chips, I have some cursor chips, a single breaker chip. The only thing I don't really have is a sword chip. I don't remember if I had anything similar to a sword chip. No sword chips in this folder, so Tengu Cross had a free pass against me, but I didn't really fight that many Falter players, surprisingly. The other thing I want to do before I go into footage of this folder in action, which I do have a match that I can go for that, is my Navi customizer. So what I have in my Navi customizer here is, you'll see that I am definitely trying my best to utilize the outer squares to bug up my programs, but for starters we have custom 2, just to give myself access to as many chips as possible every turn, especially because I do need access to my bug fix. I have Beat and Rush, which are both PvP only programs. Rush basically makes it so that if your opponent uses Invis, Rush steals their chips and causes paralysis, meaning that you kind of have to either have a barrier up already when you use Rush, or you have to use Rush at the end of a turn so that you can cross-cancel the paralysis. Basically, if you change your cross while you were paralyzed, you will break out of the paralysis. So people tend to use Invis at the end of their turns because of that. I have Beat, which steals a Mega or Giga chip. Basically, the first Mega or Giga chip that an opponent will use is basically worthless. It will do nothing. Undershirt is here because this is not casual gameplay. You're not going to be dodging every single attack. You definitely need to have Undershirt in PvP matches. It sucks if you die to a hit that you could have survived at 1 HP. In fact, last night when I recorded a match with this folder, I was brought down to 1 HP, and the first game I was still able to win at 1 HP. So Undershirt, super important. First barrier is here so that if I do use Invis while the barrier is up, I won't get paralyzed by Rush. Honestly, that's the only reason why this is here. Lastly, Super Armor is one of the most important programs in PvP. Super Armor makes it so that all those moves that cause you to get knocked back or flinched, they don't stop you from whatever actions you're taking. So for example, if I'm using a machine gun and I have Super Armor, taking a hit will not stop me from using that machine gun. If on the other hand I lose Super Armor, then getting hit by an attack will stop my machine gun animation. As for the non-command line programs, I have Attack Max, just to increase the damage of my Buster as much as possible. I had a single charge one. Don't know why, honestly, it wasn't that important, but I just wanted to have something in that spot. We have an HP plus 100, an HP plus 50, and HP plus 300. Now, as you can see, this customizer is not fully optimized. There's still all this area down here that I could have utilized for something, but I just didn't really see like how to use that space when I was making this folder. Ideally, I would want to have programs like HP plus 400 instead of 150. Having only 1450 HP was a little bit of a liability, but overall, I did okay in the tournament. I did win. I lost my first match, went into the losers bracket, won my first match at the losers bracket, and then in my elimination match, I lost game 1, made a nice comeback in game 2 to force a game 3, and then ended up getting stomped, unfortunately, in game 3. But hey, for my first tournament, my expectations were to not go 0-2 in the tournament, and I technically ended up going 1-2, so I'll take it. It wasn't that bad. Anyways, that is all for the folder and the Navi customizer, which means for the remainder of this video, here is some footage that I recorded against RagingPotato, a member of WD's Discord server. Blanked on the word. And so that's pretty much it. This was my folder. This is the folder that I used in the Proto Cup. I'm probably not going to use it that much after this. I might still do a couple more matches with this, but I do plan on doing PvP matches with people on this Discord and probably uploading those matches. So look forward to that for sure. And that is pretty much all for now. Here is the footage of this folder in action.